Hello everyone, and welcome to this new brief discussion on Piaget. Piaget is an author we have already met several times, but of whom we have not yet covered this specific topic, namely that of cognitive conflict. Meanwhile, Piaget emphasizes how important cognitive development is for each of us, which begins the moment we are born and continues until we become adults. He basically compares it precisely to the growth of any organism. Cognitive development then consists of a real journey in which the person, the individual, finds a balance with his environment. The example that Piaget uses is that of a building that, as it is built, floor by floor, becomes more and more solid and stronger. So it is also true for cognitive development. This building takes place through two processes that we have already seen in videos devoted to Piaget in the past, and these are those of assimilation and accommodation. These two processes, during each stage of cognitive development, what do? They break patterns, balances that are already pre-existing, and then they foster the construction of new mental patterns. Consequently, they foster the construction of a higher mental level, somewhat like the metaphor of the palace. Through assimilation, the child captures information from the outside world and assimilates it by adding it to what was already pre-existing, while accommodation is a restructuring and modification of the cognitive structure that adapts to the new circumstances. So accommodation is really a modification both of behavior and of what are the schemas that were already pre-existing at the cognitive level in the child, precisely to adapt to what are the new relationships, for example, with the new objects with which the child comes into relationship. So these new objects that the child comes into contact with initially cause a kind of resistance in assimilation, and this causes, according to Piaget, a real cognitive conflict. So basically, what does it cause? A modification of what are the most complex cognitive structures, and it follows after this modification the very development of the child. The child, basically, when he finds some kind of discrepancy between what is his way of seeing the world and the new information that he receives, is forced to adapt to reality and therefore in some way to change these structures and his thinking. Piaget emphasizes the fact that this conflict usually occurs at the individual level, that is, in the interaction that there is between the child and his surroundings, objects, and everything he perceives. But in his study, it is also pointed out that social interaction can involve cognitive conflict. How can social influence stimulate conflict? According to Piaget, when two children interact with each other, confront each other, they often have different views on many things. This conflict comes up during those logical operations that children perform in an attempt to find a common perspective, or rather to reconcile two different perspectives with each other to find a balance. So children, for Piaget, in the peer relationship and through cooperation, attempt, through an examination of different points of view, to understand each other. In practice, children then, through cooperation, discuss conflicting logical propositions in order to find a balance. The purpose of cooperation is twofold. On the one hand, to remove the spontaneous belief proper to egocentrism, and on the other hand, to minimize blind trust in the authority of the adult. Piaget then emphasizes the fact that this kind of cooperation is effective if it takes place among peers, that is, among children who have the same level of growth, but expresses much perplexity instead about the same effectiveness in the adult-child relationship. And this is because with fellows and peers, the child can build a relationship of reciprocity, while in the relationship with the adult, things change in that the adult, however, is perceived as the one who already possesses knowledge, and consequently the child somehow has to adapt to this knowledge that only adults have. So basically, what happens between two peers, between two children who have the same cognitive development? that when faced with a problematic situation and when faced with the emergence of positions that are diametrically opposed to each other, it is inevitable that conflict may arise because the two positions are seemingly irreducible, so it then becomes inevitable for the two individuals that, in order to get out of this seemingly insurmountable problematic situation and thus to find the famous balance, an accommodation of individual cognitive structures takes place that is fostered by cooperation. On the other hand, in the case where the two children do not have equal cognitive development, it may happen that this conflict emerges precisely from the asymmetry of the view of the situation itself. In this case, the child with more evolved cognitive development will be able to give the other child a more evolved view on the problem at the center of the debate. Well, with this in-depth discussion of Piaget and the discourse of cognitive conflict, my video for today is over. I bid you farewell and refer you to the next one.